Hi, welcome to Alberni Thrive. I'm Alicia LaRue.
And I'm Eric Plummer.
And today we've got something really special planned. Stay tuned. I find it's a really exciting time to be part of Port Alberni. Lots of really neat things happening right now.
There's this critical period that Port Alberni is going through right now where it's trying to rediscover itself. And there's a lot of discussion about what works for Port Alberni, what's great about Port Alberni, what needs to be changed in Port Alberni. Hi, welcome to Alberni Thrive. Today we're going to be talking about forestry. Now, forestry was the driving force behind Port Alberni's establishment as a community, but in the 21st century, the industry is destined to have a different role. Today we're fortunate to have Mayor Mike Rattan here to talk about the forestry industry, what lies ahead, and what options the community might have in the future.
And I would like to add, we did have two other guests that we had planned, but because today we pre-film Alberni Thrive, it's October 15th. So right now, our other guests are stuck in Vancouver and Penticton. So that's what I said, something special that we get a one-on-one with Mayor Mike Rattan. So yeah.
Thanks very much for joining us again, Mike.
I'm happy to do that.
So let's start off talking about the Union of BC Municipalities Convention in September. There was representatives from municipalities across the province at this convention, and there was one resolution that was voted in by, I believe, 80% of delegates to stop old growth logging on Vancouver Island. This could be disastrous for the forestry economy on the island. Is there concerns about this after this resolution was passed for Port Alberni's economy specifically?
I'll tell you, the concerns are as much about the way in which this resolution came about as the potential consequences of the decision. So the resolution doesn't mean that the province is actually going to do this. What it means is there's a message being sent to the province that 80% of the delegates there felt this was a good idea. The problem for us as a community and the problem for our First Nations neighbors is that this resolution was put forward without any consultation at all amongst the proponents of the resolution and the communities that are impacted as a result of the resolution. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't at all stop logging the old growth forests. What I am saying is that if we're going to do something like that that is that dramatic for communities, there has to be a discussion with the communities as to how are we going to mitigate that decision? How are we going to get our capacity to produce products for that big worldwide market out there with a different dimension wood? Because it's not that we won't have wood. The forest industry is a very vibrant industry, and we're great at growing trees here. But the mills locally are not geared up to handle smaller dimension wood. That takes investment. That takes really significant investment. And that investment has to come as a result of discussions between the provincial government and our forest companies. So our major producer locally is Western Forest Products when it comes to the lumber side, and it's Catalyst when it comes to the paper side. Neither of them is geared up to use the small dimension wood. They'll need some help in order for that to happen. So we can't just impose it right away.
Yep. So now was this discussed during this?
It wasn't. This resolution came out, and when I was walking through the foyer when it first came about, and by the time I got through the foyer into the assembly, there had been a few people speak, the vote was called, and poof, it happened. So there really was very, very little debate on it. I think in total there were fewer than 10 speakers on this. The question was called and the motion passed.
Now, Mike, you mentioned our First Nations neighbors. The Huu-ay-aht First Nations have been very vocal about this. The day after the resolution was passed, I believe, they released a statement saying that this, if old growth logging were to be banned on Vancouver Island, it takes away from their legal and historic right to responsibly manage their own resources. Do you think that this resolution indicates a lack of understanding from the rest of communities in the province as to what our local concerns are and how that is important to our community and our economy?
I think it shows that significant disparity in terms of perspectives between urban and rural, between our large population centers, such as the Lower Mainland and Southern Vancouver Island, and what drives their economies, and the rest of the province, and what drives the economy for the smaller communities in the rest of the province. Because by and large, no matter how hard we work as smaller communities to try and diversify our economy, there's still the economy that is based on, first and foremost, the use of the resources that we have in our land base. And you know, there's a transition. It can't just happen overnight. And the transitions happen in the Lower Mainland, the transitions happen in Victoria. And so the connection between the people that live there and the use of our natural resources has significantly diminished. The same way that many of our children don't understand where our food comes from. Our adults don't understand where a lot of our provincial wealth comes from. And so we have a huge job to do as a province in order to make sure that everybody understands what the basis of our wealth is. I mean, we know that our economy in British Columbia is doing really well compared to the rest of the country. We know that our budget is doing well compared to the rest of the country. But we also know that in BC, there are pockets of significant growth, significant diversity, but there are also pockets where there's tremendous economic challenges. Whether we talk about northeastern BC, northwestern BC, parts of Vancouver Island, there are significant challenges. Mm-hmm. So we all need to work together in order to be able to fully participate in this vibrant provincial economy.
I think that the one attitude that probably played into this recent resolution at the UBCM is something that came from Port Renfrew earlier this year. It actually came from the Port Renfrew Chamber of Commerce, and it was an idea that they put to the BC Chamber of Commerce that an old growth tree is actually has more economic value in the forest as a tourist attraction than it does in a mill. Does that hold in Port Alberni, or are we still rooted in the more traditional uses of our forests?
That's a really good question, you know. And I have to say that I don't think it holds true in Port Alberni. I think people in Port Alberni fully understand the value of Cathedral Grove. We fully understand the value of people going through here, heading out to the Carmanah or the Walbrant. We fully appreciate all of that. But we also understand that we can't change our local economy overnight. We have approximately 8,500 jobs within this community. And approximately 2,500 of those 8,500 are directly or indirectly dependent upon the forest industry. So we can't simply turn off that switch. Mm-hmm. We have to change the focus of that.
But what if that switch gets turned off? What do we do?
Well, it would be like 1981, 1982 all over again. Mm-hmm. Because we would have a significant economic impact if it was just simply turned off. So it's not responsible to simply turn it off. We have to adjust. We have to change our focus, change our way of using this resource. Mm-hmm. And we're working on that. And the province is working on that. The companies are working on that. But we can't expect them to do it overnight.
In some ways, it's been a shaky year for the forestry industry on Vancouver Island. The Franklin Division loggers have been out of work since Christmas time, and I think we're talking about more than 100 people, due to a rate dispute between Western Forest Products and Western Forest Products contractor, Island Pacific Logging. As a municipality, what role has Port Alberni taken to help the people that have been out of work for so long?
Well, by and large, you know, those loggers are back to work now. So they've come to an understanding between the union and Western Forest Products and their primary contractor that they needed to address that wood that was lying down on the hillsides. So, but as a community, what we've done is to pressure both the provincial government, the union, the forest company to continue to get together at the table and talk through this particular rate dispute. We can't get involved in the substance of the contract, but we certainly can continue to pressure the parties to talk. We have also looked at what's the role of the province in all of this, and how can the province really address the issues of the levers that make this forest work? Because it's all based on rules, and it's rules that in the end are at the discretion of the provincial government. And I think we've been pretty successful at getting the parties to the table and getting them to continue to talk. The other thing that we did as a community, which was something that was really fun, was to raise a whole lot of money together with help from the Blue Marlin folks. And we had a great time raising some money for the loggers themselves who were out of work. And you know that that particular event, that one night, raised almost $10,000. And then together with money that came from other unions and other sources, they raised over $20,000 to assist those out-of-work loggers, those guys who had been, at that point, out of work for over 6 months. And I think financially it didn't make a huge difference for them, but I think emotionally it made a huge difference, so that they understood that their community was there to help them.
Yeah, and was able to feel that support from the community.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great talk, and we'll definitely come back to this for sure, obviously. And we're just going to cut to a quick break, so come back. Welcome back. This is Alberni Thrive, and today we have, as you were viewers at home watching before, we have a special guest today talking about forestry, Mike Rattan, and yeah.
So I want to talk about a popular bone of contention among a lot of local people here, which is the volume of raw logs being exported from our port to be manufactured elsewhere. Now, we know that this has increased over the previous decade exponentially to far out surpass the amount of wood that's actually being manufactured here by local people. As a community, what role can we take to ensure that there's more work being done here so that more of our mills can see this wood?
As a community, our biggest role is to, frankly, educate ourselves about the reason for the raw log exports. And that's been part of my education and part of the education of the council for the city of Port Alberni, is to, why do we do this? You know, there's been actually in 2016 quite a decline in the volume of raw logs exported out of our port. And the reason isn't because there's no market for it. The reason is because Colson's sold their wood license to the Tequat First Nation, but they still have their mills locally, and they don't operate their mills unless they can have access to wood. If the wood's going offshore, they don't have access to it. So that they actually have the right, under law, to say, we want some of this wood first, and we want this particular type of wood first so that we can operate our manufacturing. Right. So the province actually has created this process where our local manufacturers have first right to that wood. So that's what's happened out of Port Alberni. And it's impacted us this year. Now the major thing though is that often when a forest company is going in to log a hillside, they look at the trees on that hillside, and there's this whole range of trees. Unless they can make it economically viable to take those trees off, they're not going to do the logging, therefore the economic activity won't occur, therefore people who are loggers won't have work. So some of those trees, if they get reserved for export, because they're not needed locally for manufacture, that's what creates the necessary profit in order to make it worthwhile to log that particular hillside. And back to your first question, which is, what do we feel about it? Of course, as a city, we would prefer that our wood be manufactured locally, that as much of it be used locally to create additional jobs, and that we would far prefer to send out lumber, manufacture wood products, than we would the raw logs, because we want to see the activity happen here. Often the logs will go to Asia, whether it be Korea or Japan or China or what have you, and then come back to us as finished products. And then of course we then pay the premium. But it's part of a bigger picture, and it is not just a simple solution.
My understanding is that we are part of an international market, which is a big reason why so many of these logs are going out of the community, because bids are being offered from some Asian countries that our local companies can't compete with. So possibly it makes me wonder if we should be lobbying the provincial government to be more protectionist with our resources. Do you think there's any truth in that?
Right now, our manufacturing capacity can't handle the size of those logs that are being exported. So we need to create...
So the size is too small?
The sizes are too small. So we need to create mills that can handle the smaller dimension wood. And then there would be less wood that's going offshore. So it's part of a bigger manufacturing decision.
Now, I'm just curious, why hasn't the industry in itself seen this trend and make the changes not, slowly to be able to adapt to the change in the size of the wood?
Well, the industry is certainly aware of the trend.
Yeah.
But it's a matter, is there enough profit there for them to justify the millions of dollars or tens of millions of dollars of investment in retooling the mills to take advantage of this? And the decision at this point is that no, there's not enough profit locally, because of course the cost of production in British Columbia is far higher than the cost of production in Korea or Japan or China. Mm-hmm. And we need to do things in order to take advantage or take advantage of the opportunities, take advantage of the resource that we do have. And one of the things that our local companies have been doing for the last, and when I say local, I mean British Columbia, have been doing for the last several years in particular, is improving the equipment that they're working with. It's slow, but it is beginning to happen. If you go to New Zealand is investing a pile of money in technology, developing technology, buying new technology, taking advantage of their intellectual capital to then create a situation where the wood comes off the hillside at the lowest possible cost. BC, by and large, for the last 20, 25 years, hasn't reinvested in the equipment to the extent that it needs to.
And now who's, not that I want to say using the default word, but like, what will be the solutions now? Has it got to go through the government getting help from the government to put in more money from them to get better equipment from the government as well to allow the raw logs to, something, because obviously it's a free trade, but to have something to protect the raw logs and keeping them here? Is that what you would suggest to help BC and the economy grow from this and create those jobs again?
Well, if you're a small contractor working with machines that will maybe cost up to $2 or $3 million, if you have to go to the market to borrow money for those machines, and it's going to cost you 11, 12, 13% for that money, you're not going to make that investment because you're just not going to be able to get a return on what you're going to borrow. But the company that you're working for can get access to a lot cheaper money than that. And in fact, it's in the best interest of the companies to lend the money to the contractors and get it back from them over time, so that they can then become much more competitive in the world market. And we're beginning to see that happen. And that's one of the things that, as certainly as mayor, that I've been pushing our forest companies to do for the last number of years. Lend your contractors the money and recoup your investment in your own contractors over 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. But make sure that they're working with the most up-to-date equipment.
Now we're talking about more traditional ways of manufacturing wood, but is there untapped resources out there in the cut block that could be used for other purposes, for example, biomass?
Absolutely. You know, you bring people here, particularly from Asia, and they look at stumps, they look at branches, they look at sawdust. They don't see waste wood. They see economic potential. We all need to see economic potential. Scandinavia is doing a really good job with creations of centers of manufacturing, which they refer to as a biomass cluster, where they have different products from multiple types of wood, whether it's oil out of the cedar sawdust, or it's oil out of the balsam needles, or it's energy that's taken to produce steam that makes electricity or makes heat or what have you. There's many, many different kinds of uses for our basic resource.
Another benefit of this is that we do have air quality concerns in this community because of the geography. Every winter there's air quality advisories, and a lot of this wood waste does end up getting burned. It ends up in the airshed as fine particulate matter.
And then question, you brought up Scandinavia. I'm just curious, has that been through you researching, or has that been you meeting potential business people that see opportunity in this area? I'm just curious, because that to me is quite interesting for myself.
Both.
Okay.
And you know, you talk about the burning of the slash in the fall. That is one of the things as a city and as a region that we're pushing our local companies to rethink. Get other local companies established to go out into the bush and grind the stumps, grind the branches, use that fiber that's created for other commercial purposes. It's there, don't waste it. So here's an example that happened last year. We, of course, had to clear mass amounts of wood in the area of the new airport. And the first thing that happened was all the stumps and things were put into big piles. And the contractor set it on fire. And local people, rightly so, started complaining, saying, no, 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 you can't do that. So then the regional district made the correct decision, in my opinion, to shut it down and get a local company to go out and grind it up into sawdust. And then that sawdust could be used for other purposes. So in our local area, and in fact in British Columbia, we do have a very integrated forest system. The stumps going into sawdust go into the paper mill to produce paper or pulp or whatever happens to be needed. And you know that our pulp mills use 60% of the sawdust that's created by sawmills. If we didn't have pulp mills, what would we do with that 60% of fiber? We would drown in sawdust. So it's important that we keep these industries going because they need each other in order to operate. You can only make so many wood pellets.
Oh, exactly. And at the same time, it's a travesty to see it just being burnt when, you know, and that's what I enjoy for myself, because obviously, you know, I mean, I am definitely a fan of the old growth trees for sure, and I see the opportunity for that for tourism and just preserving that. But I do appreciate the whole thought process with bringing in other countries that are doing it right and see those potentials. So yeah.
Well, also we know that the Scandinavians, the Norwegians in particular, have this huge investment fund. It's the world's largest investment fund. At this point, it's approaching $1 trillion US. Well, we would like to access some of that money to create the opportunities for our community that are being created in Scandinavia. Let's take advantage of this. The same way when several decades ago we wanted a new type of machine for our paper mill, we went to Finland to get that and brought it here. We sent our local people to Finland to look at the design, look at the operation, and figure out how to get it back to Port Alberni.
It sounds to me like if the forestry industry is going to be able to continue in this community in any sort of a healthy manner, it's going to have to look differently on how it's using the resources out there.
We believe it needs to change. We absolutely believe it needs to change, but definitely the industry is there, the resource is there. It is truly a renewable resource. It's truly a sustainable resource. It's our responsibility as a society to demand that that resource be used far more completely than it's being used right now.
Agreed, for sure. Thank you so much, Mike. This was a nice, unexpected show, but I think it went incredibly well. And so thank you.
Well,
very
thank
informative.
You for the opportunity. This has been great.
Great, perfect. And great, thank you so much for viewing in at home. Feel free to check out our website, www.albernithrive.com. And yeah.
See you later.
Yeah, stay tuned.